is our new little test cookie. It's our new toy over the weekend. Well, welcome. I'm so glad that everybody could join us tonight on this topic about disasters and getting prepared for disasters. On behalf of myself and Nathan, and then Tracy and Eric, we're all AFP. We're really excited to be able to kind of share some of this information with you. I will say that a few months ago, I was having a Zoom call with some financial planners that live in California and live in North Carolina. And we were talking about what was going on where they live. And so the people that were in California were in Los Angeles. They were being impacted personally by the fires at that particular point, in addition to the fact they had clients that had already lost their houses, lost pets. And so then we're talking to the people in Ashland, North Carolina, and they had had the floods, but then they were then dealing with fires. So they were saying to us that were on this Zoom call, we're in panic mode right now. We are stressed out, we are tired. All of you who are sitting out there that are not in a disaster area, get ready for something that could be happening potentially in your area. And the thing about it was also to be thinking about this with a clear head, because they weren't. They were stressed out, tired, trying to deal with things, not expecting that what happened was happening to them. So it just kind of made me realize that we needed to do something to kind of start thinking about this in a little bit more definitive way. And so then I started reaching out thinking, who should we have talk about this? Who are the experts that can help guide us through some of this that could happen to any particular person at any particular time? And so given that, the people on this Zoom call that were going through this said, well, you need a mental health person. It's like, really? You know, I thought, I just never thought about that. And then they said you need somebody from your local fire department. You need the Red Cross if you can get them. And then also, we were talking about it obviously from a financial perspective. So Nathan, who is with us, and CFP with AFP. So James is with the Grandview Fire Department as the assistant chief.
Yes.
Right. Okay. And then Melissa. Emily. Sorry, Emily. I know I met you. You are with the Red Cross, and you're involved more with the community's disaster programs. And I know when I talked to you, you were in St. Louis, and you had just come from Kentucky dealing with the floods.
Yes.
Yeah. And then Emily.
Melissa.
Okay, and Melissa is with Centero. You are a master's in social work, and then also you are a licensed independent social worker at Centero. You also are the school program manager. So dealing with children is also something that we have to think about when we're dealing with disasters, if they would be in a school or something of that nature. Yeah, so anyway, that's kind of where we're at. And so for tonight, just kind of housekeeping a little bit on what we're going to do. I'm going to ask questions that some of them already gave me questions to. And then we'll just kind of answer some questions. So we're going to do that for about an hour. Then after that, we will open it up to you. So if you have a question, feel free to ask that. If you want to share a story that you think is impactful for everybody, that would be great too, because I think when we hear stories, that kind of resonates with us. So that's the other thing that we're hoping to do. And then we have a drawing for a go bag, which I never even heard of until I was talking to people in Los Angeles. And then I've been asking people randomly, do you know what a go bag is? I mean, I asked the person that does my hair, and I asked my massage person. I was asking different people. I was like, have you heard of this? And I was so surprised that people have. So maybe I'm the only one that didn't know about go bags. And I also found that more younger people had go bags than the older people. So my little survey of asking questions, that's kind of what I found out. So anyway, we are going to have a drawing for the go bag, and then also for kind of like a crank radio, so that's kind of like the runner-up. We'll just have the speakers be able to draw the names at the end of the program. And then the last thing, just kind of finish up on that one, is the evaluation form. We have one at the end. If you could fill that out, that would help us for anything we're going to do in the future or any changes we should be making. And in addition to that, once we get that back, we have a list of things that you would want to put in a go back. So we put that together, so you can have that if you give us an evaluation form. Yeah, there's always a catch, isn't there? All right, are we ready to get started with some questions? Yeah, okay, all right. So the first question, and this is one to all of you, and it's kind of just the first thing that comes into your mind. All right, quick and easy. So name a common weather hazard in Ohio that we need to pay attention to. I will start with you.
Okay, tornadoes.
Okay.
Well, that is the most common weather hazard in Ohio. I would also have to say winter storms.
Well, yeah, you guys just took on my thunder. I was going to say tornadoes or blizzards.
Yeah. So my thought is like the winter storm, but like ice storm, not so much 3 feet of snow, but half an inch of ice that just knocks the power out.
Yeah. I would add to that hurricanes, because Hurricane Ike came through several years ago. Who would have thought we'd have a hurricane here? And you have earthquakes periodically here. Nothing that is traumatic, but we've had them. So, I'll add them. And I'm supposed to just be the moderator, sorry.
Could you put fires in there?
Fires? Oh, yeah.
You also have flash flooding.
A flash flooding, yeah.
Water.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Okay, all right. So see, we do have a lot of things we need to be looking at, right, I guess. Okay, so this is another question for all of you. We're just gonna go down the line, or we'll start with taking this stuff. Okay. Why is disaster preparedness important for each of your profession's point of view?
Yeah. Well, so it gets back to kind of what you were saying a minute ago, is that you have to prepare before you're in the moment, before you're in panic mode. And also, that's in our name, financial planning. And so, you don't retire and then say, okay, how am I going to do this? You prepare for it. Because truly, and we'll get into more details about what can we do to prepare financially, but these are things that take time and have to be done beforehand. There's just, with some of the things that we're going to be talking about in preparing for a disaster financially, it's just something that takes time. And so knowing that you have to be able to think clearly and also dedicate some time to prepare is really key to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Preparation is huge for the fire department. Starts with communication between you and your family, or if you're living with friends, coming up with a plan, practicing that plan so that first time you actually execute the plan isn't when a disaster is occurring. The preparation helps keep everybody calm. It helps us in the fire service. That way we can direct our resources to the most critical needs at that time, instead of worrying about who's safe, who's not safe. If there's homeowners that come up to us that say, hey, if I got my entire family with us here, we're at this spot, everybody's safe, everybody's out of residence. We do have some pets in the house. We can direct our actions directly to the pets and know that the family's safe. So communication and preparation and execution is huge for the fire service.
Yes, preparing is so important. Primarily safety, making sure that your family survives a disaster, that your pets survive a disaster, that you avoid, fatalities, injuries, and then also ways to protect your property as well. As we saw through the slideshow, there are some instances, no matter what you have done, it's not gonna. But also being prepared is knowing what to do afterwards. So I'm sure we'll get into more details, but ways that you can make your recovery quicker, simpler, easier, building that resilience so that you and your family, your loved ones bounce back quicker, is all about that preparedness beforehand.
Absolutely, and when we look at the impact of trauma, we're looking at it really at a neurological level, what's happening, and even if you've experienced a trauma or a disaster, you're not necessarily going to respond the same way, even in the same type of event. However, as much as you can prepare ahead of time and really boost those protective factors, that's going to mitigate the impact of that trauma down the road. It's also going to help you because you have a very limited amount of energy to expend. And so if you know, I don't have to worry about these pieces because I know this is already handled, that lets you focus your energy in other areas of the recovery process.
Okay. All right, Melissa, so we're going to start with you, and then I've got specific ones for each of you. Last one for all of you, for right now. What is one thing you think most people overlook when preparing for an emergency?
Oh my gosh, I think most people underestimate the power that meeting basic physiological needs can have on your ability to cope and to navigate a trauma. And so when we look at even just basic, healthy eating and exercise, the impact that those things have after a trauma is really significant because it's helping to, at a neurological level, regulate the body, which helps you be able to handle things as they come up, but also doing those things and having those healthy habits ahead of time can be really beneficial then when you are encountering a trauma because your baseline stress level is much lower than if you're coming in with a very high stress level and then you're adding this disaster that's just going to compound in ways that I think people don't realize or they underestimate.
Same question.
Okay, what do they underestimate?
What do people overlook
Overlook.
preparing for an emergency?
Yes. So most people know where their safe spot is when they have tornadoes, and they go there. And do they have a shelter-in-place kit? I think many people are partially prepared. We had tornado drills in school and fire drills in school, but with fire drills, you mentioned having that plan, having like a fire escape plan. Does everyone have a meeting place? Everyone knows how to get out of their home, but where are you going to meet? Where are you going to confirm that everyone got out safely so that if someone doesn't arrive at your meeting place, you can notify the fire department to go in and do that search and rescue. Sadly, we've seen mom or dad run in looking for little Johnny, and he was just in the backyard on the swing set. We all have levels of preparedness. It's just getting everyone to that really good prepared level where they are prepared before, during, and after a disaster.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that. I think preparation is definitely communication, especially if you have families with younger children, getting that message across to them, making sure that they're understanding so that way they remain calm. And then not everything always goes as planned. Have a plan B if you're preparation. If you're practicing a fire drill at home, no two ways out. What if both of those exits are blocked by fire? Talk to your significant other or children. What's plan C here? What if a fire truck's blocking our meeting spot or a police car's there blocking our meeting spot? What's another good meeting spot that we could go to? With cell phones these days, if you can't keep in communication with each other, who's a common emergency contact that everybody can get a hold of? If mom and dad's out of town, you can't reach them, who's somebody that you can get a hold of and contact? So I think just everybody's prepared, but they're also going through the motions at times, so they overlook the seriousness of it at times. So always taking it serious and taking it to the next step and having a plan C, D, and E.
Yeah, I would say just, what are the odds that it's gonna happen to me? I mean, honestly, I don't know of anybody who's ever, been through that. If something happens, I'll just be able to figure it out in the moment. Like, honestly, what are we talking about here? I think that's the biggest thing, and just planning for anything in general, but especially for emergency, having that attitude.
Yeah, very true. Okay. Emma?
Yes.
Yeah, back to you. Given recent emergencies in Kentucky and St. Louis, what lessons has the Red Cross learned from these and other recent disasters that the public should know about? And what role does the Red Cross play?
All right, well, in the Red Cross, we say one disaster is one disaster. Every disaster is different. And then it goes beyond the wildfire versus flooding versus tornado versus blizzard. It really depends on the community. Some communities we've gone into are very resilient. They're more prepared than most. And that makes the whole community's recovery easier, quicker. They come together and they bounce back. And then we go into areas that are not prepared. There is no plans, there's no recovery thoughts to recovery. There's very little resiliency, and those are much longer and much harder to get that community back to the way they were before the disaster. So one of the things that we try very much at Red Cross is to do preparedness, talk about preparedness, and really get folks to take it seriously, because we do see, even locally, we have a smoke alarm program where we install smoke alarms free of charge. And I have gone to homes and they're like, oh, I've got smoke alarms. Okay, are they over 10 years old? We should replace them, after 10 years. Oh, I'm good. And they just have that mentality of, I've got alarms, it doesn't matter, they were here since the Reagan administration, they'll work when I need to. Well, they might go off because you have a battery, but it's gonna take time. And in most home fires, you have less than 2 minutes to get out safely. So it's, really trying to make people take preparedness seriously. And so through the Red Cross, we always find different partners, different organizations, and different ways of getting that message out. That the more prepared you are, the easier things will be during and after a disaster.
Can I ask a question? So we were talking a few minutes ago before we started that Ohio's pretty low on the list of how often disasters happen.
Correct.
Do you think that has lulled us into like a false sense of it's not going to happen, and making us as communities not as prepared as we should be?
I think it does have an effect because, if you're in that community or in a state that has a lot of disasters, you see it, you live it, you know friends who survived it. Here, tornadoes are our most common weather hazard, but they're, your EF0s, your 1s, most of the time we'll take out a barn. But I think last March from a year ago with the Indian Lake, Logan County tornado was a really big wake-up call for many of us in central Ohio. Like, wow, people died and homes were just decimated. So I do think seeing it and, whether you experience it directly or indirectly does kind of shake you up to think, oh, am I really prepared? Because, yeah, I agree with you. If we go through spells where nothing happens in Ohio, we just, nothing happens in Ohio until it does.
Yeah, very true. All right, Melissa. How can people emotionally prepare themselves and their families for emergencies?
That's a really great question because I think you can, even if you live in an area that is more frequently impacted by natural disasters, you can anticipate, and there's always going to be an emotional response when something happens. And like I said earlier, it may or may not, that response may or may not look the same as it did the last time that event happened. But I think just generally anticipating that the way you're operating pre-disaster is not the way you're going to be operating immediately post-disaster, and giving yourself that grace and just understanding that things are going to look different. If there are things that you've learned about yourself as far as what helps or doesn't help when you handle stress, I think having open communication with those around you, so that way when you're in that very high stress environment and you're responding differently than you normally would, they understand that and they can anticipate that type of response. And I think just having really clear communication with those around you about, when I'm in a stressful situation, whatever that is, here's what I need. And also knowing if it's a type of disaster, for example, like I live in an area that frequently has tornadoes or wildfires or hurricanes, something where there's at least some anticipation or higher likelihood that will happen, knowing, okay, what are the steps that I need to take? And that can be just logistically, because that gives you a sense of control in a situation where often at times it feels like the rug's been pulled out from underneath you. And so if you know, here are the steps I have to take, and even writing that out can be really helpful, because when you're in a trauma response and you're in what we call fight, flight, or freeze, being able to access the part of your brain that controls logical thinking, like knowing those steps to take after disaster, is impacted. And so if you have it written down, it's one less thing that you have to figure out in the moment.
Yeah, very good. James, how can families create an effective emergency plan?
It goes back to preparation and communication, like I just talked about earlier. Just communicating the plan amongst one another. Knowing when to evacuate and where to evacuate significantly improves your survivability and decreased risk of injuries. Construction these days, houses, they don't hold up under fire conditions like the legacy houses did. You have typically around 2 minutes to exit a fire residence. Fire doubles in size every minute. So something as simple as making sure your smoke detectors work, replace them at no more than 10-year intervals at the most. Change the batteries twice a year. Have two-way out, and then have plan CD&E like I talked about earlier. And then also thinking ahead of the curve. If you are unfortunate enough to have a residential fire, there are companies out there that have a checklist of what to do after a fire. There's things that you won't even think about. So just researching, finding these checklists, say, if this does happen to me, am I prepared for this, this, and this? Or is this something I need to consider? So it's all encompassing, not only preparation for a fire, but in the unfortunate event that you do have a fire, that you're prepared what to do afterwards, because that can be almost as traumatizing as the fire itself.
All right, Nathan. What can people do financially to prepare?
Yeah, so just as we've been talking about some different things, I think one of the things that, maybe one of the first things that you should do is really, to the best of your ability, think through, what if my house is gone and I cannot walk through that door again? Because when we're talking about a disaster, a lot of times we're talking about a loss of access. I don't have access to my house. I don't have access to information. I don't have access to, fill in the blank. So in thinking about preparing financially, what is probably the number one best thing that I can do? And that is to have a really solid emergency fund, having cash in reserve. And this is, when I alluded to, like, it takes time, to prepare financially for a disaster. It takes time to build up an emergency fund. But it is definitely worth it to diligently and deliberately save for an emergency. Two is thinking through, okay, I have an emergency fund, then how can I access that emergency fund? So if we think about, I don't have access to my home, or my wallet is gone, or whatever the case may be, having multiple points of access to that emergency fund. Well, how do I do that? One, having physical cash, whether that's in your wallet, in your go bag, in your fireproof safe in your house, having some cash. And then this is where, you could think through what is a good amount to have. Well, is it just for you individually, or you a family of 5? Thinking through things like that. Even beyond that, having multiple points of access to your bank account. Having a debit card, maybe you want to have a couple of those cards in different secure locations in addition to your wallet. A lot of times now through your bank account, you can access through your phone using like contactless payments. So setting something up like that up, or using a payment app or something. I'm thinking of something like Zelle, which was developed by banks to transfer money bank to bank. These are the type of things I think that it would be smart to research them so you know exactly what they are. PayPal is different than a Zelle, which is different from other things that I probably can't even pull off the top of my head. There are a lot of options out there, and just thinking about what options am I comfortable with to access my bank account or my credit card, things like that. So one, building up that emergency fund, and 2, having multiple points of access to do that. I'd say those are the main things.
Okay, right, that, Emily. Are there things people should do to help them recover more quickly from a disaster?
Yes. You mentioned Go Bag, and that is a bag packed so that if you have to evacuate quickly, you just grab it and go. And it has everything you need for 3 days. We also recommend a shelter bag or a sheltering kit. I have a big Rubbermaid tub in my basement, which is my tornado safe spot. And again, it has everything I need. And we're talking bottle of water, non-perishable snacks, a first aid kit, flashlight, a battery-powered or a hand-cranked radio. But there's also things you can do, such as, and Nathan mentioned it, with different means of accessing your money. Because if you have a house fire and you run out into the middle of the street in your pajamas and your house burns down, there goes all your credit cards, your bank cards, your documents. So we recommend making photocopies of driver's license, birth certificates, passports, leases or mortgages, titles, if you paid off your home, your car, titles. All of that will help the recovery process. With the Red Cross, we will be there whether it's a single family home fire or a massive tornado or hurricane. We will come to help, but if you can prove who you are and where you live, you've gotten through the first round, no problem. Unfortunately, especially in home fires, many people have lost their driver's license. So then it takes longer to prove who you are and where you live to get that process, whether it's financial assistance or referral process started. So I have all my documents photocopied in a locked drawer in my office, at my desk at work. And you can, if you have a trusted family member, make copies for them. I have all my copies of all my documents are with my sister, and then I have copies of hers. And that way, it speeds up that recovery process because you can prove who you are, where you live, what you own, and that really starts the ball rolling much, much more quickly.
One other thing that we suggest to our clients is to scan all their documents in and save them on the cloud.
Yes.
So that they have that wherever they go, they don't have to worry about having a paper copy. So that's one of the first to-dos we have people do. Actually, the first to-do is buy a really good computer and scan them. You want to spend your money, go do that. Okay, Melissa, we might have covered a little of this, but just from the standpoint standpoint, effective ways to manage trauma and stress after a disaster.
Yeah, so one of the first things again is making sure that you're paying attention to your physiological needs because the body and the brain are connected, and if you are hungry, if you are thirsty, if you are exhausted, that's going to compromise your ability to navigate really complex and stressful situations. I also want to acknowledge that that is easier said than done because when you're in recovery from a disaster situation, those things may not be accessible, or there may be, things that feel even more time sensitive. I think also getting yourself into some kind of a routine, and that may look different than your routine outside of that disaster situation, but having that predictability and consistency is going to be really helpful in navigating because there are those constants that you can go to. And then the biggest piece is really just talking to people, because when you are holding all of that trauma in, I liken it to shaking a bottle of pop and then opening the top or opening the tap and it explodes, versus if you can be able to talk through that gradually, and knowing that depending on the situation and your kind of balance of risk and protective factors, it may be beneficial to talk to someone long term. When I'm doing community crisis responses, we're not doing really detailed processing of a trauma in the immediate aftermath. We're really focusing on just stabilization, again, through basic needs, through emotional, physical regulation, but knowing that down the road, that's something that may be beneficial in that long-term recovery.
It brought up a thought with the financial planners in LA, the conversation. Many of these people were now in hotels that were away from the scene, and the idea of having a routine, trying to get the kids or them back into a routine was so critical, they said. So this kind of came to my thinking when you mentioned that. Yeah. All right, Nathan, what areas of personal finance are important to focus on to be better prepared to survive a disaster? Insurance and
Well, I was going to say insurance.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is kind of getting back into preparing for it. So before the disaster, it is really important to make sure that not that just that you have insurance in place, but that you have the right insurance in place. In our line of work, we've really seen firsthand how much the insurance industry has changed, specifically property and casualty. So we're thinking about auto insurance and homeowners insurance primarily. So we always recommend, and we do believe this 100%, that it is well worth your time to have a good relationship with a very knowledgeable and reputable insurance person, whether that's an agent for a specific company or maybe preferably a broker with, that can work with a few different companies. But making sure that your policy covers what we need it to cover, what you need it to cover. Because it could be that however many years ago, for example, your homeowner's policy covered, water damage from when your neighborhood flooded, but now it doesn't because there are a lot of changes within the insurance industry. So one, spending the time to make sure that your insurance policies cover what you need them to cover. So that is, I think, one of the big areas that you can prepare in. But also then being able to access that coverage afterward. We've talked about accessing communication and having information in your go bag, for example, but having multiple points of access of your insurance information. Who do I call? What's my policy information? Having that in multiple places, so that if there's a fire, for example, or a tornado, or something where you can't get back into your house, having that information available. So you need to know about your policy, but you have to have the right policy in place beforehand.
Okay, James, what items should be included in a basic emergency kit?
She already hit on the go bag pretty good, yeah.
I stole your thunder.
No, it's okay. Yeah, like I said, all important documents, any medications that you might be reliant on,
Medications, yeah.
all important documents, flashlights, non-perishable food, water, like you said, multiple points, maybe one by an exit in your house, one at work if you're able, maybe even car, depending on where you live and the crime rate in that area, if you're comfortable parking it in the garage, leaving a go bag in there. Even if not, just take out your important documents and everything else should be good to go. And, I'll pivot a little bit. Something you can help prepare, not a bag, but one of the leading causes of house fires is kitchen fires. So having a fire extinguisher readily accessible in your kitchen, and now these days even on Amazon or other manufacturers like that, they make fire blankets that you can just throw over your pot, pan, skillet. Obviously, that's only if you're comfortable. The health and safety of all the occupants is the most important. So if you're not comfortable, obviously just evacuate. But if you are able, use the extinguisher, turn off the heat source, throw the blanket over it, and then evacuate. Make sure everybody else is out. Get to that meeting point if you have other family members there as well.
It's going to relate a story in the sense that my story is we have 3 fireplaces, and one of them, or 2 of them are gas. And so I woke up one morning and I could smell wood burning, but I didn't see anything. I saw no smoke, no nothing. Walked outside to let the dogs out, and there was a hole burning on the side of my house. Yeah, so I went back in and I told the kids very calmly, the house is on fire. And they did, and it was February, and so the fire department came, you guys came, and so we're in the basement, and I said, it's just so weird because I have a gas fireplace. And they said, gas fireplace, have you turned it off? And so immediately, everybody left and they turned the gas off. My house could have blown out. But it wasn't something that I even thought about, I mean, from where it was located, to think about that, so, yeah. I
No
guess
smoke alarm went off.
no smoke. There was no smoke. So it didn't go off. Yeah, it was on the side of the house outside. Yeah, so, anyway, yeah, there we go. Okay, I have one last question, and then we're gonna kind of open it up to everybody here. And we'll just kind of, I don't know, we'll start here. What resources are available to help people after disaster? Where should they go?
Yeah, we in the Central Ohio area, from a mental health standpoint, are really lucky because this area is so rich in resources. There are so many different community mental health providers, private mental health practices. There's really a wealth for the lifespan as far as ages, as far as presenting needs. Oftentimes when there's a large-scale disaster, like Emily was mentioning, the floods in Kentucky, North Carolina, sometimes there will be mental health providers on site, and so they can help get folks connected immediately. But there's so much in the area, and I always encourage people to see who's physically closest, proximity, what's going to be most accessible for you, but also check with your health insurance because they've got lists of covered providers. Psychology Today also has a really great tool on their website where people can go and they can search for a mental health provider based on a lot of different factors, based on zip code, based on insurance that they accept, based on in-person or telehealth, based on gender of the provider and languages spoken and areas of expertise. But I think as far as kind of where to go first, going to your health insurance, you can also call your primary care provider, and they can give you a list of resources and referrals as well. And oftentimes when there's been a disaster, you can let the intake department for that organization know, and oftentimes they'll do everything they can to get you it as quickly as possible because we want to be able to support people in their time of need. So letting them know kind of here's the situation, here's the severity, because that may also help expedite that process for you.
Okay, great.
All right, so Red Cross, if there's a disaster, they respond. If it's in family home fire, our disaster action team will come and make sure, you know, you have a roof over your head and money to buy food or clothing, really to make sure you're okay for the next 48, 72 hours. Large scale disasters, we come in, we open up shelters, we work with partners and restaurants and catering companies and feed meals. We do mobile feeding for those that may not be able to cook but are still staying in their home. We also distribute emergency supplies, toiletry kits, cleaning products for homes. So really, we're there just to take care of the people affected. Once that kind of stabilizes and we can get into the damaged area, we do a damage assessment of every single home, and then we start the recovery casework process. So we have caseworkers, every household will get one. They can deny any services. You know, we're not going to force you to take Red Cross money or referrals, but that working through that long-term recovery, whether it is financial assistance or referrals to other organizations or other resources in the community. Of course, on a large-scale disaster, it's a big process, but we do that for single-family home fires. The disaster action team will assist that family with, you know, financial assistance to get them through the next 2 days, and then a caseworker will call them and talk them through, you know, what they need to get back into their home. So we always partner with other organizations as well, because it really is a whole community approach. So many different organizations, government, non-government, houses of worship, community groups, they all bring something to the recovery table. So it really is a whole community approach to recovery. Every time.
Yes, like she was saying, how they respond to single-family residence fires. We're fortunate to have an excellent working relationship with the Red Cross. Any incident we have, we always call them. They're always fast to get there. They're always excellent help. Large-scale incidents, we rely on them as well. They don't necessarily, they divvy up their team, so they're busy focusing on getting people in shelter, making sure they got food. So we also have a good relationship with CODA to help distribute individuals to the proper places. So not one hotel or shelter or rec facility gets overrun. They do an excellent job of dividing it up. And so we're just thankful for them because they help us out a lot as much as they help the residents as well.
Yeah, so I would say a good resource, honestly, I'm going to make another plug for having a good relationship with an insurance person, a property and casualty insurance person, and taking the time to sit down with them and talk through your personal situation. And I think that is a really, really good step in being prepared for a disaster.
I will say also during 9/11 and a few other scenarios out there, not to that extreme, there are a lot of organizations, financial planning organizations, Financial Planning Association, NAPA. They will come in, especially in the area, and help people pro bono on their financial information and help them get back on their feet. So I've got a lot of people in New York City that did that during 9/11, and it was pretty impactful. So yeah, so from a financial planning perspective, I know our organizations can be out there to help people too, if there's a need for that. Okay, so I'm going to open it up. I don't know if anyone has questions, and if you do, just kind of raise your hand. Tracy will give you the mic, and you can ask the question.
Questions on fire, this is fun. What are the most common causes for house fire? That's my first question.
One of the leading causes is kitchen fires.
Okay. And if you have a fire extinguisher, how do you know it still works?
I'd recommend changing it every 5 years at the most. You can get them at Lowe's, Home Depot, anywhere at Amazon if you want it delivered, pretty much anywhere. Yeah, you can. If it starts to look discolored at all, if it's in the box or the extinguisher itself, that means it's time to go. Or if it starts leaking any of the chemicals, it's also time to exchange and get a new one.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I ask a follow-up question kind of in that same vein? So a few years ago, I replaced all the smoke alarms in my house, and when I was buying them, I noticed that there were like different types of smoke detectors. Is there one that, I mean, and then I tried to figure out which one was the best one, and then eventually I just picked one. There's probably a better way to do that.
These days they make combination ones. Combination ones are
Okay,
the most reliable way to go these days.
okay. And what are there are like two main ones?
Brands.
Or no, like there were like different, like it senses different
Are you
things.
talking like ionization versus
Yeah,
photoelectric?
exactly, I just couldn't
Yeah.
remember what they were, yeah. Okay, so that combines both of those types.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. Can you speak to what you were just talking about, these two different, like this is news to me, these two different combination kind of fires or what it's putting out? What is that combination that you're talking about? Ionization and,
That's ionization and photoization is the two different types of smoke that it'll read. One reads the fine particles in the air, and the other is a temperature one. But the combination also, smoke alarms also now carbon monoxide as well. So smoke and carbon monoxide dual detectors.
awesome. And the last question I have is, I have a small apartment. What do you suggest? I'm thinking of the blanket, the fire blanket, or do you think the fire extinguisher if I chose one? Or do I need
Both, they're not that expensive.
Yeah, if both are feasible, if not, I would lean towards the extinguisher, just in case the fire gets out of control, you can carry the extinguisher with you and it'll clear a path, where the blanket's just pretty much stationary.
Okay, that's good.
I think you should try the fire extinguisher. I mean, I don't know how many people that have one, but have never used it, and then sort of maybe not know how to use it if they need to use it.
Yeah, we do offer fire extinguisher classes.
Oh, really?
For our fire department as well, yes.
Are the spray ones as good as the ones with the hose? You know, they have the new, you can get them online, you know, they spray more like a can.
I don't have any experience with this spray.
Jim has a question.
So I was just going to follow up on her initial question. I know there are different types of fire extinguishers. What is the best kind? I'm assuming for kitchen fires, it's different than, say, your trash can or something's on fire.
Yeah, what we would recommend is an ABC extinguisher.
ABC.
ABC, yeah, so it covers everything from your ordinary combustibles to electricity to grease.
Right. And is there a certain size? Because I see there's all different size fire extinguishers as well.
It just depends on the size of your residence, really. A 2 to 10 is pretty standard.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Sarah has a question. Just quickly, I think there were two questions happening here. One was regarding smoke detectors and one was regarding fire extinguishers, right? Okay.
Okay, so we're not always at home, which is surprising to some people. Do you have any tips for if we're caught out in either a natural disaster or a man-made disaster like the Last of Us fungal infection or a riot after a Ohio State Michigan game?
I carry a go bag in my car. I don't have my personal documents in there, so, but, you know, I always have, and granted, weather, temperatures, you know, bottled water might freeze in the winter, food might, you know, depending on your snacks, might melt or get gross in the summer. But I typically have like at least some granola bars, some bottled water, a blanket, especially in the winter. I pack those heat, you crack them and you put them in like your shoes and your gloves, hot hand warmers. So yeah, and I just, as well as like jumper cables and things if my car breaks down. So I have a kit in my car, whether I'm stranded, I've got water, snacks, and stuff to tide me over until I can, you know, help can come to me. I also have a kit at the office, in case I need to evacuate the office or, you know, and I think a lot of that came from 9/11 when we saw women in orange stilettos walking out of Manhattan, you know, and just, you know, I always have a pair of tennis shoes in my office because you never know. And, you know, I used to work corporate America, so I have to admit now that I'm in disaster, I don't really wear heels to the office anymore. But I still have that habit. I always have a pair of tennis shoes under my desk. So it really is, you know, that mental processing of what if I'm stuck in my car on the side of the road and I'm waiting for a tow truck, or maybe it's a snowstorm, and you know we see this all over the country. You know, even down south, you know, they are not prepared for excessive weather, and so you know an inch of snow comes through and everything stops, and people are stuck. How do you stay warm? How do you stay hydrated? So it's really important to have those preparedness kits, not just at home, but in your car, at work, multiple accesses. So wherever you spend the most of your time, which, you know, in my world is work and home, I have what I need if I am stuck there. Yes.
I just want to offer something too. I don't know that I need that, but okay, thanks. I have also taken a certain amount of money and stuck it in a sock and hidden it in my car in the event that something happens and I'm in my car or near my car at an event and something needs to happen from there. So just a thought somebody gave me and I'm passing it on.
Yeah, we do recommend cash in your, like a little bit of cash in your go bag, in your shelter at home, because in many cases, if it's a weather hazard, a natural disaster, if there's lack of power, you know, boom, there goes all the cash registers. But in some cases, you know, you can still purchase things you might need using cash. So it's always good to have, you know, a little stash of cash. So that's excellent.
I have a comment and a question, and an add-on question, which is, which one's your car?
That was my question.
So the comment is probably something that everybody that's really was news to me not that long ago, which is to get one of these little things that's about the size of, I don't know, a cookie package, and it's a jumper cable and a flashlight and a whole bunch of stuff that costs about $80 at the auto store, and you keep it in your car, and it's charged all the time. It holds a charge for a long time, and we've used it quite a few times because, as anybody who's ever used jumper cables, you know, if you're parked head in, or if you got a problem, or you got to wait around, this thing is, even I can use it. It's so wonderful, and keep it in the door, and it has saved us a lot. The question I had was for you, Melissa, right? And it's about in an emergency or crisis, you mentioned in flight or what was it?
Freeze.
Freeze. That's the fetal position on the floor, right? Can you just tell us a little bit about what that's like if you're standing in the middle of your house and it's on fire and you're looking for the cat or whatever it is? What's happened to your brain?
Yeah, so this, I mean, it stems back to, early times of cave people and, when there was a threat, you didn't have time to, sit around and think, what do I do to solve the situation? You're gonna, saber-tooth tiger's gonna get you before that happens. And so what the brain does is it shuts down access to the prefrontal cortex. So that's the part of your brain that does all the most complex things, problem solving, executive functioning, and it forces you into the midbrain, which controls emotions. What's also happening is you are getting a cortisol dump, and that's one of the things that forces you out of your prefrontal cortex into your midbrain. It forces you to move really quickly, which in an emergency situation is what we want to happen. There's a fire, there's a flood, you don't have time to be sitting around, planning, thinking, what do I do? And so what that might feel like is heart beating faster. A lot of times people notice like they get really flushed, hands shaking, heavy breathing, and that's your body's way of moving you as quickly as possible. What we also know now is that when you've experienced a significant trauma like that, it takes some time for the body and the brain to realize we're not in that immediate danger anymore. And especially if you've experienced other stressors or other traumas, you're stuck in this constant cortisol dump, and your brain never shuts that off. And so that's where, again, those things like having a routine and making sure you're eating and sleeping, it's gonna help shut the cortisol dump. There's also a lot of other things happening chemically in the body, and I am not going to get all of them, but when you think about like adrenaline and norepinephrine, those things are also happening, and it has to do with increasing your blood sugar to, again, get you moving faster. But then when we look at recovery, it's all about, okay, how do we turn those systems off? Because otherwise we just have these stress hormones continuing to dump, and that's where we see long-term people who may have things like PTSD. What's happening is the body and the brain just are never getting out of that kind of trauma cycle. I'll do a plug if you are interested in the science of this. The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk is a really interesting book, and he talks about the science of what's happening and why does our body do what it does, not only in instances of natural disaster, but other traumas as well.
I read that book. It is a good lesson.
Can you say the title again?
Yeah, it's called The Body Keeps the Score, Bessel van der Kolk. I think it's been on the New York Times bestseller list for a number of weeks, so if you Google it, it'll probably be one of the first results to come up.
It's a good book.
Are there any further questions?
I have two quick ones. What is that? Is that thing just a portable car charger? But we're talking about that's
You
portable.
can plug it into it's a USB in your house and charge it up, put it out of your car and forget about it because it stays charged for a long time. Or you can charge it into a car.
Okay, and that's what it's called. But if I go to the automotive store, I want a portable car charger.
Yeah, a portable jumper cable.
Portable jumper cable, okay.
Yeah.
And then, after Terry's story about the fireplace, that was a gas fireplace. Are electric fireplaces properly installed, and appropriately insulated, safe enough? That would be, I guess, a fire person.
Yeah, I have an electric fireplace, so I hope so. Do you want
I'm considering one, so I thought, as a fire department.
Yeah, I've heard of any issues with mine.
Thank you.
I love mine.
Yeah, I've been thinking about it for a while, so, thank you.
Nathan?
Yeah.
This is about insurance. I don't know who told me this, an agent or someone, but they advise in preparing for the worst that you do a video throughout your house or pictures of, valuables, that sort of thing.
Yes.
Been
Probably
used.
us.
No, it's on my list, and we just didn't get to it.
Okay.
But yes, that's goes hand in hand with, you gotta make sure you have the right policy, and then access the policy, and then that's how you apply the policy, is by documenting what you have. One of the things that I read recently that I think is really good, and I had never thought about before, is even recording serial numbers off of different, whether it's a phone, computer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Sarah Joyce did that. That's where I heard it. She's the expert that I remember now. Recording your serial numbers or other identification thing that will identify a specific device that you have. So yes, that is a very, very good suggestion.
Melissa, I have very young grandchildren, and they have experienced the tornado warnings and things like that, and their parents are very good about explaining things. But occasionally they spend nights with me, and I live in fear. No storms, please. Because the oldest one, who's 9, gets very anxious, and the 4-year-olds pick up on that. So any suggestions on how to talk to them beforehand or during?
Yeah, so in having discussions beforehand, it's really a balance of, you want to validate the fear, because I see this a lot with kids, and I see this with kids who have crippling fear of thunderstorms, and that's a really scary, it's a really sensory overload experience, and so I do a lot of education with kids about, what's the difference between a thunderstorm versus a tornado, what is our safety plan here at home, but also going back to who are the people who are going to do their best to keep you safe, because at the end of the day, I think they're really seeking that safety and security, and so if they know, hey, whether I'm at my house or at grandma's house or at school, here are the people who I know are going to do everything they can to keep me safe. So I think that's the kind of the preparation beforehand. During, really a lot of physical regulation, because again, they are getting stressed, they're getting anxious, they're starting to kick into that fight, flight, or freeze. And so if that's, we're gonna do some deep breathing, we're going to have a dance party so that they're moving, we're going to listen to music. And also distraction, especially with young children. We see this too when there's instances of disaster, and I have a lot of conversations with parents about being really mindful about media exposure during and after, whether that's a natural disaster or an instance of community violence. Being mindful about what information do kids really need in that moment, and so knowing, hey, what's my quick distraction? If that's, hey, we're gonna go in the basement and we're gonna turn on some music, or you get to watch TV even though it's 9:30 at night because the sirens are going off and we have to go to a different spot in the house. Finding those ways to distract them, and then again, that physical regulation, that's gonna help to balance some of the anxiety. And the earlier you can start that, the better, because when they're already up here, you can bring them down, but it's going to take more time. And that applies regardless of age. When I'm stressed, it's much easier for me to manage my stress response when I'm down here versus once I'm up here. So I think being proactive in getting those things started will help as well.
Yeah.
I'll also put a plug if you have young children in your life. Sesame Workshop for the littles has some really fantastic resources for all kinds of situations, but I know they've got videos and resources on their website too. So if you, again, want to be proactive in having discussions, or if you know a young child who's experienced something, they're a really fantastic resource and very easily accessible.
Yeah, great ideas. Yeah.
Any further questions?
Yeah, I got one more for the fire person. Where can you purchase ladders, like for example, for a second, third story house that you could keep inside and use?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Purchase ladders, like
An emergency escape ladder.
to escape out of a second, third story house.
Yeah, I've seen them in some residences, and I'm not sure where they got them, but they usually keep them right below the windowsill, the ones that fold up real small and have the hooks on the end. Just hook it to the bottom of your sill, and the ladder falls, and then you can climb down.
Do they come like in different lengths, do you know?
I believe so, yes.
Amazon.
Yeah, I've seen that.
I would search Amazon for an emergency escape ladder.
They come in different lengths.
Yeah.
Yeah, Amazon.
Of course.
That's pretty much the answer to everything.
And any other questions?
Any other questions? No more questions?
Well, thank you. You've been wonderful.